We're going to begin this hour with the impacts from Hurricane Idalia. It is now a tropical storm. We are tracking the storm with you, or we were tracking it rather as it hit yesterday.
Now today, we are starting to see the damage that was left behind. Idalia brought significant flooding and destruction across 4 states overnight. The storm caused serious flooding in the Carolinas. This is video from Charleston, South Carolina. Just last night, the water rose 3.5 feet above the normal high tide. Idalia also spun up some incredibly strong winds and even some tornadoes. They were strong enough to flip this car over right as someone was driving nearby.
The devastation is only now coming into focus in Florida. Take a look at this video from across the state. Roads have been completely inundated by floodwaters. Homes are completely flattened. The lives of the people who live there have been turned upside down.
Water's probably to the ceiling of our house right now.
I think we've lost everything.
Nobody's going to get power for weeks.
We heard one of the trees start to crack, and our eyes just got widened. He came and he jumped over top of us.
So your husband put his body over your body to protect you?
I don't think anybody expected it to be this bad.
We will track where Idalia is right now with meteorologist Angie Lassman in a moment. But first, let's begin with our teams in the storm zone. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley is in Morehead City, North Carolina. Julia, you are seeing the last few effects of Idalia. What are the conditions there right now? I can clearly see the wind around you, at least.
Exactly. Wind is really what we ended up getting here in the Carolinas. They were worried about water, and they got mostly wind. We've seen that case of that car toppling over on the highway. There was a case of a tree falling on a car in Wilmington. Also in Wilmington, just 2 hours south of me, part of an animal hospital, the roof collapsed. Here we've seen waves of wind coming through. Sometimes I'm even kind of bracing myself against it, even though it's not hurricane force. This is a tropical storm, Idalia, at this point, as these are the last remnants of the storm as it heads out to sea. It's not nearly as aggressive as it was as it hit the Florida coast, and it's starting to break up. And so sometimes the waves can come intermittently now. But those waters that they were so worried about, in a large part, those fears have been assuaged because that high tide here around 10:30 last night didn't come at the same time as their heaviest rains, which were later, probably around 2 to 3 a.m. into the early morning. So those came during a lower tide. So those 4-foot storm surges they warned about didn't happen, at least in this area. Now, school is canceled all the way from here as far west as Raleigh. You have 50,000 people without power throughout North and South Carolina. But in large part, this area was really spared. I mean, the area where I'm standing right here 5 years ago in Hurricane Florence, I would have been in feet of water. So for the most part, yes, wind did cause some damage here, but the waters have stayed back, at least in most places.
Julia, you mentioned 50,000 in that area, North Carolina and South Carolina, without power. Is there any sense as to when the power could come back for them?
So these people could have their power restored relatively quickly. In fact, that number 50,000 may already be coming down as we speak, in large part because they don't have to do the kind of rescue and recovery efforts in areas like this, like they are in Florida. It's easier to get to people and restore that power. Really what they're up against is the sheer numbers. Not everybody can have their power back at once, but they'll start at the major areas and work their way out. But we're looking at a much shorter timeline, maybe hours or days here in North Carolina versus much longer in Florida.
I'm sure that's welcome, especially during this back-to-school season. I know you said some schools are still closed. Julia Ainsley in North Carolina, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.